Week 11 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I looked at on the wire this week. The first guy, Hayden Hurst of the Cincinnati Bengals. So right now we know the Bengals were on bye week in Week 10. But Hayden Hurst, he's been a decent contributor to fantasy owners in PPR leagues the last few weeks. Week 7 versus the Falcons, 6 catches, 48 yards. Week 8 at Cleveland, 4 catches, 42 yards. And Week 9 versus Carolina, 5 catches, 35 yards. So right here, Week 11, not the greatest of matchups at the Steelers. I give up the 7th least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But going back to Week 1, he did have 5 catches, 46 yards versus Steelers team. And he's been a pretty decent tight end this year here, I believe, is Hayden Hurst. So right now, with Jamar Chase most likely out a couple more weeks, I will believe, he's going to see target share. And he's a guy that could work the middle of the field and be a nice security blanket for Joe Burrow. Get on the wire this week. The next guy, Foster Moreau of the Las Vegas Raiders. So right now, Moreau, he's available in tons of fantasy leagues at 84%. And he had a nice ball game, 3 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown for this Raider team. So we know Waller's out at least another 3 or 4 weeks after going on injured reserve in Week 10. So right now, the last few games here for Moreau. Week 8 at New Orleans, 6 catches, 31 yards. Week 9 at Jacksonville, 2 catches, 42 yards, and a fumble loss. And then Week 10, the best game of the season here for him. 3 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. So Week 11, not the greatest of matchups at the Broncos here. It's a division ball game. Going back early in the season, he didn't really see the field much in that one versus the Broncos in Week 4, where Waller was healthy. But I think Moreau can possibly make a few plays in this one. And like I said, if you're a Zach Ertz owner, any of these guys on this list could fill in and be a decent fantasy option. So right now, I got Moreau as an ad this week. The next guy I looked at on the wire, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. So over the last 4 weeks here, 4 touchdowns have been scored for Juwan Johnson. And he's been a favorite of Andy Dalton, no doubt about it. But when Jameis Winston, if he comes back to the starting lineup, which is definitely a possibility here, I don't know if Johnson's going to have the good rapport with Winston like he did, obviously, with Andy Dalton. So the last few games for Johnson, Week 7 at Arizona, in that one, 5 catches, 32 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 8 versus the Raiders, a dud game, 2 catches, 14 yards. Week 9 versus Baltimore, 2 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. And Week 10 at the Steelers, 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. So right now, a tough matchup versus the Rams. I give up the 3rd least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season, but available in 88% of fantasy leagues. He's a guy that's been a red zone target. The targets have gone up a decent amount as well over the last few weeks here. And hey, if he gets a touchdown in 30 yards, you'll take it. And that's what he's pretty much been doing, is Johnson over the last month of the season. The next tight end I look to get is Kylan Grayson of the Indianapolis Colts. I know the Colts, though, have Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, but Grayson, he came out of nowhere in this ball game. And he's a guy that's available in 100% of fantasy leagues. More of a deeper league ad, no doubt about it. But it's a guy to mention as well on these videos, because I usually like to have 5 to 6 guys on these waiver wire to give fantasy owners in deeper leagues and a little shallow of leagues options to get. So in this one in Week 10 at Vegas, 4 catches, 57 yards. And it's a good thing for everyone over here in Indianapolis with Matt Ryan back in the starting lineup, because everyone else pretty much did nothing with Sam Ellinger. Paris Campbell, we saw have a good ball game. Michael Pittman had a decent ball game. Granson had a good game. So this offense was moving. They got the victory. Granson, he might get more playing time. We'll see over at Jelani Woods, obviously, and a Mo Alley Cox. But right now in deeper leagues, if you're desperate for a tight end, he's out there in 100% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final tight end I look to get on the Warriors, Cole Kmet. I mentioned Cole Kmet as an ad last week, and a guy that was out there in a decent amount of fantasy leagues still, but right now only available in 41% of leagues. So right now this will be the last week to have an opportunity to go out there and go Kmet. So right now, not many guys doing anything on the spare offense in the receiving game besides Cole Kmet. Justin Fields, he's been a touchdown machine, running the football himself and making big plays, and pretty much just hitting Cole Kmet. So the last 3 weeks here for him, Week 8 at Dallas, 2 catches, 11 yards, and a touchdown. Week 9 versus Miami, 5 catches, 41 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 9 rushing yards. And Week 10 versus Detroit, 4 catches, 74 yards, and 2 TDs. So right here, Week 11, a great matchup once again at the Falcons. I give up the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And Cole Kmet, if he's out there in your league, this is the last chance, like I mentioned, to go out there and get him, because now a guy with 4 touchdowns in his last 2 ball games is getting heavy volume, obviously, in the red zone, and a favorite target of field. So that's a few tight ends I looked at on the waiver wire for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.